Welcome. My name is Ted Knutson. I am the CEO of StatsBomb. My background for about a decade was in professional gambling. I helped turn around a company called Pinnacle Sports, which is one of the world's largest internet bookies. And then my wife got tired of me working every weekend, especially because we had two small children. So I went to work for football clubs. I worked for 2 seasons at Brentford in West London, and the same owner owns a club called Midtjylland in Denmark, who are now the 2-time Danish champions. After those 2 seasons, I then came out of football and looked around and kind of saw the makings of change. It felt like the football space was ready to start accepting data and moving forward with data analysis. So at that point, I founded StatsBomb, which had originally been a blog, founded in 2013. We turned it into a company. So the start of 2017, we made StatsBomb. It was originally a business intelligence layer to help football clubs do cool things. And I'm going to hand it off to Shergul for a second. We'll get into that in a minute.
So I'm Shergul Arshad, and like Ted, I also come from the football industry, like many of you guys in the room. I used to be the head of digital for AS Roma. I'm originally from Florence, from Firenze, Fiorentina fan. And more recently, then I was the CEO and founder of Mondogol, which was a daily fantasy football site, and got into StatsBomb with Ted just in March. And I think what you'll see today is really cutting-edge technology that'll show how clubs should be using advanced analytics. And a lot of other sports are further ahead than football. Especially in certain markets, football has been very traditional, and I think what you'll see today is how clubs should be using analytics to help coaching and scouting. There you go.
So for StatsBomb, we have 3 distinct club stakeholders. The first one are the analysts and the coaches, and that's really, with the analysts especially, that's where we started. Using StatsBomb to analyze opponents, their game style, their strengths and their weaknesses, to look at combinations, where on the pitch things are taking place, set piece plans, and understand player characteristics and what we call skill sets, and opponent characteristics. And then the recruitment department, which we now collect over 40 leagues, 40 competitions. Next year it'll go up to 60 all around the world. We're providing the tools to find skill sets, as we said, replace specific players. So say that, Xavi's retiring, you look across the entire world and you look for players that are similar to Xavi. Who has that skill set? Who passes like Xavi? These things are actually incredibly valuable, and you can start to talk to coaches in a way that makes it easy. You're not giving them numbers. We don't throw numbers at people who don't want numbers thrown at them. We have a lot of visualizations that you'll see today, but the concept here is that we're able to talk football and provide better information. And information is the key. So you can compare players across teams and leagues, as well as using bespoke date ranges. So say that your head coach, God forbid, were to be fired, you would then be able to set like a new date range, or for a different team that you're looking at. And we also help provide some user experience and website information. You can use StatsBomb content for the website, for applications, match programs, enable pre and post-match analysis, and it's easy to find like thousands of players and player visualizations with our tools. We also help teams win games and win in the transfer market. So we use analytics to measure and track team player performance, to understand the opposition, to target recruitment, and in some cases actually to motivate players. One of the things that players we have found anyway, working with them, is that they like to have KPIs. They like to know how they're performing. They would like to know how they're supposed to improve. This is true for young players. Say that you have an aspirational player that wants to play like, I don't know, Isco. And he's in your academy, and his favorite player is Isco. We can go back into the data set over the last 5-6 years, look at how Isco performed during that period of time, and give a comparison for how this young player and what they need to work on inside of their game to improve.
Yeah, I think another important variable here is the bottom line, which is winning, okay? So we've had the fortune of working with some amazing club partners, folks like PSG, AC Milan, LAFC in Major League Soccer, which is just destroying everyone in that league. And a lot of them are using our tool set specifically for those reasons, as Ted was pointing out. So we've had the fortune of seeing our club partners the average is 20% increase in points that they've generated year over year in games. So pretty impressive numbers. And then talk a little bit about the data, the core behind it all, Ted.
So, as I said, we started as a business intelligence layer that was built on another data company's data set. And at some point, we wanted to start to improve the data that we were working with, because we work hand in hand with coaches, we work with analysts, we work with directors of football, we even work somewhat with owners. And they were telling us that, hey, the data that you're using doesn't do these things. And these things are important to us on the pitch. So, like, you don't know where the players were on a shot. And that's like really valuable. You don't know where the goalkeeper was on a shot. Very valuable. You don't know that this forward actually works his socks off and pressures the opponent constantly. And that's actually incredibly important for us in our style of play and a high press. And we didn't. They were right. So we went through this very painful process. And I don't recommend any of you guys do this because it is like a real pain. But we started to build our own data set. And we basically end up collecting double the data per game, so 3,400 events per game versus all of the other data companies out there right now. We have location of goalkeeper and defenders on every shot. We've got things like API that make it easy to integrate into your own team's stuff. But the other thing that we looked at was we didn't think the data quality was good enough. And this is a fact of life. Right now, if you were to walk in to a club and go to the coach and you had bad data that didn't match what they saw on the video, you would immediately lose credibility. We're still quite early on in the data revolution in football or soccer, and what we find is that this credibility is incredibly important. And so when we built our new data, we started to collect more and more useful stuff. We have more QA. If you're using data from a video provider out there, like, they are just doing it to encode the video. They don't care about the quality of the data necessarily. And we know this because we spent a lot of time working with two different video providers' data. We had it almost for free, and we decided that it wasn't good enough for actually us to go to customers and say, hey, we know this is right, you should use this. So we built our own. And our own data now has had incredible feedback from some of the biggest clubs in the world, helping us to improve it. So we listen to our customers. They're very happy to use it. We're growing rapidly. And the space and the data space is also growing rapidly because you need better information.
Yeah, so I think, to make this come to life a little more, we're going to walk you through as if this was a live demo. Everything that we do is on a browser, so it's very easy to access for you guys. But you'll see some of the data difference, which is better than even just seeing facts, okay? So if you were to come into StatsBomb IQ and log in, this is what you would see, and you typically would land on a team page, or you'd search for a team. So since we're in Madrid, we polled the audience and decided to lean towards Real Madrid on the presentation only. We don't have a favorite. And so this is what the overview page would look like. And you'd see things that we had to submit the slides on Friday, so the standings are not quite up to date, as you know. But these are our slides. So Real has moved up to the top. And this is how they look on a few different metrics. But we dive deep into everything. So I'm going to go very quickly here because I want to give you guys a flavor of the data. So this is our player sorting. And you can sort by about 40, 50 different metrics. We're just showing you one of them right now, which is expected goals. So on a season total, you can see how amazing Benzema has been playing this year. But look down at the bottom, you'll see Hazard. And obviously Hazard's only played a couple games, so he doesn't show up very high. But then when you look at this per 90 minutes, more accurate representation on if players are playing 90 minutes, you can see even a guy, not just Hazard, but even Lucas Vazquez, when he's been on the pitch, how many expected goals he's creating. This is a quick snapshot of how Real Madrid has been attacking this year. And you'll see just a couple things to point out. Very strong on counterattack shots and shots. So the shot volume that they're generating this year. Our radars, as we call them, typically show on the outermost layer, the furthest out, is the top 5th percentile in Europe, and in the middle is the bottom 5th percentile. So typically if you see lots of color, this is a good thing. If you don't see color, that's something that they're not doing as well. So if you see like box cross percentage, it means that in this case, Real Madrid is getting a lot of crosses in the air into the box, which doesn't necessarily lead to possession or expected goals as often. So that's one thing to point out. We also have a sorting capability, so you can sort and quickly compare to other teams in your league. So versus Barcelona this year, again, as of Friday, you can see stylistically a lot of difference, right? Barcelona's taking far fewer shots, but is also bringing the ball into the box on the ground, and some other stylistic differences. This is looking at last year's Real Madrid shots, every single shot that has been taken.
It looks like a lot.
And what I want to point out about these shots, okay, is competitors like an Opta, they are typically giving you expected goals number, and everything that stems from expected goals, like assists and was it expected goal buildup, etc. The shot that they're calculating expected goal on is solely based on distance and angle. So you could see, like, a shot way out here is obviously going to be low percentage, and up in the middle of the penalty area should be high percentage. But our blue, which shows low percentage, you might see a shot like this that is actually, a warm color or a hotter color, and you'll see some shots in the middle of the box that are bluer. And I'll show you why that's actually happened. We also have filtering capabilities. So if that looked like too many shots, what if I only want to see right-footed shots that were taken off of a set piece that was not a penalty kick? So now I've filtered, and I'm now looking from a coaching perspective. I want to see how many right-footed shots did Real Madrid take. So going back to what a shot looks like. So here is what should be like a 70% chance with Opta data if you're looking right in the middle of the pitch, because it's right near the penalty spot. Instead, we see it's a 6% chance. So the bottom here where it's XG, 6%. And the reason is why? Defenders, right? And other players on the pitch. So it sounds simple, but we're doing a ton of stuff with AI and machine learning, and we're covering all of this shot mapping so that you have a much more accurate representation of every shot. So in this case, Marcelo scored a goal on a 6% chance given the presence of defenders. This shot, Gareth Bale, was much further out, should have been a much lower percentage. It's actually a 41% chance because he had beaten the last man and only had the keeper to beat. This shows a trend line of expected goals. And what's interesting with Real Madrid is, of course, there's been a couple manager changes. The blue vertical lines show a change in manager. Green is expected goals for, and purple is expected goals against. So if you see there was a period, not too long ago in the middle of last season where that wasn't looking as good. And obviously with the return of Zidane, a lot of things have gone back to some better numbers. And then this is sort of defense. If you look at a snapshot of how Real Madrid looks. And what's interesting is I removed on purpose pressure. So the reason is other data companies are showing data to all club analysts and coaches without pressure. And pressure is probably one of the single biggest difference makers in both coaching as well as opposition analysis, okay? So with pressure, this is what Real Madrid looks like. Okay, so some similarities, but also some big differences in areas which you can attack. So if you're coaching against Real Madrid, you could see this and see what other companies are looking at and see different spaces on the field where there's less pressure and you can move the ball into areas with less pressure. This will show a game. So we have a game module, and I chose a game from a couple of years ago, but this was interesting because it was a 2-2 draw, a Clásico. Had to show a Clásico. And what's interesting is actually, 58% of the time in this situation, if you replay the game 100 times, Real Madrid would have won 58 times. Barca only would have won 18 times. And in that game, it shows that the 2-2 draw was actually an unfair outcome. But obviously, this is football. We can only look at expected goals.
And one of the things that coaches often want to hear is, how is our process doing? We can control the process, but we can't necessarily control the outcome. The outcome of football is luck-based. There's quite a bit of it, but there's also skill. So if you look a little more at the process, if we had a lot better chances than our opponents, we possibly should have won. If we do this on a regular basis, we're going to gradually move up the table. And you've probably heard before in different presentations that the table lies. And the fact of the matter is, it does for a while, until the end of the season, at which point it's historical fact. But you would much rather be a team that is performing quite well and generating a lot better expected goals than your opponent, because that means that in the future, you're likely to then gradually move up the table. Even Pep Guardiola and Liverpool are adapting things like this, despite the fact that we think that they're the best coaches in the world. They are, but they want to know a little more about should we have won that game, and that's what this is providing a little more accuracy about than just the basic score line. Sometimes goals are scored because they hit a beach ball on the pitch, and it's impossible to quantify that. But over time, we will see that it starts to tease out a little more accurately from expected goals.
Cool. So another area that this was just launched this summer, a tool called IQ Tactics. Okay, in this module within StatsBomb, you can go into depth around every single action performed by a team or an individual, including the accuracy of a pass and the length of a pass and which foot. So here's an example using a team. So PSG, this shows all of PSG so far this season, where they've been passing the ball, okay, and the accuracy to which they've been passing it and the distance to which they've been passing. So if you look at in this particular quadrant that we selected, you can see that the sort of deep balls to the left have been pretty off, but obviously a ton of accuracy on the short passes down the right side. This is a player, so now we're looking at Leo Messi. And these are just the last, I think, 8 games of last season. And we're looking at only his shots, okay? So I've selected just shots. And you can select the white line that's selected is then reflected on the right side. And you can see the sequence, the entire sequence that led to his shot. So you could track tendencies of players and where they're getting sequences from. Here we're looking at Sergio Ramos, and an interesting example here is we're looking at every single pass emanating from his own defensive box, and only the ones he made to the flanks, up the sides, okay? So you can see how the vast majority went up the left side, and then you can, again, select a specific pass, and you can see that in this case, my eyesight's not that great, 49.7 yards. And you can see exactly to whom it went. It was received by Marcelo, and it was a right foot pass. Now, if we were to look at only by foot, okay, so this is interesting. Even though you can see a much higher volume of passes he made with right foot, as well as where the inaccuracies were. So if you see on the left side with his left foot, the longer the ball, it seems there was a lot more inaccurate passes.
So one of the reasons why we put together IQ Tactics was to just start to provide baselines for analysts to really dig into the data. And one of the things that we believe strongly about at StatsBomb is not providing you like a set of numbers to rank players. We believe that we can provide actionable insights. Now, you're just seeing slides, but the fact is you can see all of these different filters, and analysts in their daily life are digging into this and really loving it. And those of you who are saying, well, this would be really interesting to put on video, you're right. And that is something that we're going to do in the not too distant future. It's already spec'd out into our development roadmap. But at that point, when you're able to tie together the data and very clear ways that you're looking at the data, you start to pull out how teams are building up. You're then able to then go straight to the video. The coaches are much more comfortable looking at video. But at the point at which you start to have the video and the data align and they can see it right next to it, you've kind of won the battle of skepticism over data and information because it's the same stuff. And as long as the video looks like the same as the data, they start to have more trust and more faith in it. And that's really important as you work inside of clubs. It really matters for them to be able to trust the analysis and trust the information that's on the screen is correct.
Okay, so now let's look at a player. So now we're going to shift into sporting director mode and scouts, okay? So how could you look at our tools and find players that might be comparable? So we're looking right now at the 18-19 season of Benzema, which is different, as you'll see shortly, to his current season. These are some of the things that he did really well last year. His touches in the box were really high. He had a very strong shot percentage as far as those touches leading into shots. Mediocre on number of shots, and he also was good at not turning the ball over. But let's look at what he looks like this year. Okay, now again, this is before this last game, but you can see that two areas that have been just dramatically improved. Again, it's only been 4 or 5 games. Is the touches in the box and the shots. So he's taking many, many more shots, which are leading to many more expected goals. But ironically, almost exactly the same expected goals per shot. So obviously one of the big things he's changed is taking more shots. Now let's look at Karim Benzema versus another striker. This is the 18-19 season of Roberto Firmino. Now, very different type of player, right? Firmino, as you can see, as evidenced by the blue shape, pressures. So you can see he's pressuring the ball a ton, pressure regains, and also takes even fewer shots, and is not touching the ball in the box nearly as much as Benzema. While we're talking about Firmino, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and look at Firmino. When you remove pressure events, you can see on the right-hand side, those are all the quote-unquote defensive activities in totality that other stats providers are reporting. So if someone said, how did Roberto Firmino defend? They would say, oh, well, he had 55 fouls and 33 tackles, and just kind of stuff that's pretty standard. Media companies use this information in real time, but pressures are not something you can just immediately measure in real time. Now take a look at Firmino when you add in pressure. 733 extra pressure events. And as we all know, this is probably his biggest strength as a player. And Liverpool, the Mane and Salah's success is often triggered by a pressure regain triggered by Firmino. So back to players. So looking at our search algorithm, we can also click a button and show similar players to the 18-19 version of Benzema. So this is showing a list. So potentially could even be a shopping list of sorts, based purely on statistics, and there's no regard for division quality, league quality. We try to keep everything objective. We think that stats companies that are trying to introduce a quality rating is a subjective measure, okay? It's completely subjective.
We can tell you what we think about some of these leagues, and we happily will, but we've left it open. And one of the things we also do is we collect a lot of women's data. We're not collecting, we collected the World Cup. It's free on our website if you wanted to get stuck into that. We also have a Lionel Messi data set that is free on our website as well. Should you want to get really stuck into the data, find out what type of data we produce, it's all there for you. But we do collect women's data, and we've seen that some teams who have strong women's teams are saying, hey, show me the Lionel Messi of the women's game, and potentially that is inside of the database too. And it's also a really cool hook from the media side. If you wanted to do stories on this type of stuff, we know women's football is growing more and more. This is the type of thing that our platform could power.
Yeah, so let's take a look at the top name on that list, Arnautovic. So you can see the statistical comparisons, and you can see how last year's version of Benzema compared to Arnautovic. Now let's look at a former darling, Cristiano Ronaldo, and let's see how he played with Juventus in 18-19. And you can see, really strong on shots and expected goals per 90. And you might want to see, how did Ronaldo compare with the Ronaldo of the year before with Real Madrid? And almost, very similar statistics. You can see he scored more goals here in Madrid, expected goals per 90, but almost all the other things look exactly the same. He brought his same style of play. Maybe that's a surprise, maybe not, but you can see when we look at players transferring leagues, we were looking the other day at like Guendouzi, who League 2 in France, his stats in the Premier League were almost exactly the same as he was in League 2 in France. So here are similar players to Cristiano Ronaldo in 18-19, and again you can see some names, like a Harry Kane, which you might expect, and then you can see, people that maybe did not, immediately spark your first name, like Odsene Edouard.
But one of the things that teams use that for is to find the players of a similar style in their own leagues. And I swear to you, like in English League One, which is the third league down, I had a coach say, well, find me the Lionel Messi of League One. And we literally just went to the stats and data and said, okay, these are the 5 guys that look most like it. It's League One, so no one is anywhere close to him. No one's close to him in the rest of the world generally. But it's to help spark that conversation and to build scouting lists. And really that's the purpose behind this, using data to help filter all of the players in the world into manageable buckets that you can then hand off to your very talented scouts. There's no fight between the scouts and the stats people. We use them together to find the best players for our teams.
And a name that jumps out here to those savvy to the list here is, Luka Jovic. So if you look at the statistical comparison with Ronaldo and Jovic at Frankfurt, you can see possibly why Real Madrid thought it would be a great purchase to bring in a guy who actually statistically looks a lot like Ronaldo. He has to play it before we actually see if that's going to happen.
Yeah, let's not make that prediction. This is just, we're saying historically.
So we're going to wrap up really quickly to show you the last tool, which is our Scout feature. So this is if I want to find a new striker. We come here. It's like a template. So you click striker, and then you set your different parameters so you can see key statistics like pressures or shot touch percentage, shots, etc. You can also filter by age. You can then drag these sliders. The more you bring it to the right, the better the player. The more to the left, the worse at certain categories. In this case, we've set a series of parameters that will show us the 55 players that meet this the most accurately. And you can see that we've specifically chosen XG90 as one of the highest things we want to look at. We can also select certain leagues. So we cover over 40 different leagues with the same level of data. So League 1 or League 2 in England, or La Liga Segunda here, we cover with the same exact detail as La Liga or Champions League.
We also do academies as well. So if teams want to track their academy players on the same data set as their first team, we collect that information too.
So based on last year's data, with expected goals as one of the key things that we were looking for, and again, had scouts been using this, like successful folks at Brighton ended up doing, you can see Neil Maupay results right up at the top. And what did he look like as a player? You can see the pressures he put on. But let's also look at his radar. You can see very strong player with shots and expected goals, 90 expected goals per shot. So just a small example how this was a guy playing in to championship level, and now has been brought up to Premier League and has had some very early success. So last slide, I'll turn it back over to Ted. Talk a little bit about the stats trends in the U.S. and globally. And
so we know that this is a massively growing market. Plenty of outside research firms have confirmed that they expect sports data to continue growing, well into the next decade. We're seeing more and more across sports. It started in baseball, and this is Billy Bean, played by Brad Pitt and Moneyball. But it then went on to the NBA. Ice hockey has it. NFL right now is in its own middle of the transition. And football also has. And we know for a fact, because we've seen success in this. If you guys have not read the Liverpool piece on all of the smart people that they hired in the New York Times from last year, you should definitely check it out, because it illustrates how the Champions League winning team had a great team behind them, not necessarily looking at things on the pitch, or helping out on the pitch, but helping out with computers and mathematical models to find better players and play better football. So that's really what this is about, and we provide actionable insight. And thank you very much for your time.
yeah, if there's any questions in the last few minutes we have left, we'd love to hear from you guys. You can find us afterwards,
Yeah,
too,
exactly.
if you don't want to.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.